If humanity was born fractured, and there was never a single original mother tongue, it leaves us with a profound biological mystery. What exactly connects us? We look for the origin of language in ancient campfires and the first spoken words, but the true origin story is entirely silent. It is a story of biological hardware built in the dark over millions of years. Human DNA does not contain a universal dictionary. You were not born knowing a single word. Instead, you inherited a physical operating system. We're going to map the physical transformation of the human skull and throat. This is the exact machinery that allowed a primate to process complex acoustic data. In this video, we are opening the biological black box, from the dangerous descent of the larynx to the expansion of the neocortex to the hidden genetic switch that coordinates our thoughts. To understand the physical barrier to human speech, we must first look past the brain and carefully examine the biological plumbing. We know that other primates possess highly complex social structures, deep familial bonds, and strict community hierarchies. Yet, despite their intelligence, they cannot speak. The limitation preventing a chimpanzee from forming words is not just located in the mind, it is fundamentally an issue of anatomical architecture. In almost all mammals, the larynx, commonly known as the voice box, sits high up in the throat. This positioning is a practical evolutionary design because it helps separate the breathing tube from the swallowing tube. A chimpanzee, a dog, or a horse can comfortably breathe in air and swallow water at nearly the exact same time with a much lower risk of choking. The two essential pathways do not dangerously intersect in the way they do in us. But in the hominin lineage, that arrangement gradually changed. Over hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, the human larynx slowly descended deeper into the neck. As it dropped, it created a long, hollow, resonant chamber above the vocal cords, scientifically known as the pharynx. This new internal chamber acted much like the hollow wooden body of an acoustic instrument, amplifying and shaping sound. Other animals also show forms of laryngeal descent, often to deepen calls and exaggerate body size. But in humans, this anatomical shift was co-opted for finely articulated speech. Combined with a unique anatomical feature called the hyoid bone, this changed everything. The hyoid is a small horseshoe-shaped bone in the neck that does not connect to any other bones. It acts as a free-floating anchor for the complex muscles of the tongue and the lower jaw. This specific arrangement allowed our ancestors to manipulate the air flowing from their lungs with remarkable precision. It gave us the physical ability to shape rapid, distinct acoustic frequencies, carefully forming the sharp consonants and open vowels that other primates cannot physically produce with the same flexibility. But this anatomical upgrade came with a severe daily cost. Think about the simple automatic act of eating your dinner tonight. The evolutionary trade-off for complex speech is that human beings have a much higher risk of choking on their own food than most other mammals. Because our voice box dropped, our airway and our food pathway now cross directly over each other. Every single time you swallow a drink of water, a small flap of cartilage must close perfectly over your windpipe, or you will choke. Our bodies accepted an ongoing, potentially lethal risk just to give us a resonant, capable voice. Evolution is a strict biological accountant. It does not introduce a daily, potentially lethal risk like choking unless the long-term reward heavily outweighs the cost. The ability to produce a wide range of clear, distinct sounds provided a powerful advantage for survival on the open savanna. The throat ultimately became a finely tuned acoustic instrument. But an instrument is entirely useless without a processor capable of decoding the complex rhythms it produces. Making distinct, precise acoustic sounds is only half the biological equation. If an early human could produce a complex call to warn their group of an approaching predator, the rest of the group needed to understand it instantly. You must possess the neurological hardware to rapidly parse, separate, and decode those incoming sounds in real time. This brings us to the timeline of the neocortex, the outer layer of the brain responsible for higher-level thought. If you look at a sequence of hominid skulls, starting with early ancestors like Australopithecus and ending with Homo sapiens, a clear physical trend emerges. Across roughly 2 million years, our cranial volume increased dramatically, approximately tripling in size. The skull expanded outward to house a rapidly growing processor. But this expansion presented a dangerous biological problem. Brain tissue is metabolically demanding. It is, ounce for ounce, one of the most expensive organs in the entire human body to operate. It requires a continuous, heavy supply of oxygen and glucose just to survive. Evolution is efficient. It does not fund large calorie-hungry organs without a strict survival-based reason. Consider your own body at this exact moment. Even if you are sitting completely still on a couch, your brain consumes about 20% of your body's energy. It is constantly burning calories just to maintain this vast neural network and to process the specific words you are hearing right now. Over evolutionary time, we traded sheer physical power for cognition. We gradually gave up some of the heavy muscle mass and the robust jaw strength of our primate cousins in order to fund a larger biological hard drive. The brain expanded to manage an overwhelming influx of complex social and environmental data. To process language efficiently, the brain required dedicated, specialized real estate. Deep within the folds of the neocortex, specific regions began to develop and specialize. Areas that we now call Broca's area and Wernicke's area became highly tuned centers for communication. One region is especially important for planning and producing the sequences of sounds in speech, while another is crucial for mapping incoming sounds onto stored meanings. Together, they act as an integrated decoding machine. When a sound wave enters the human ear, these specialized regions work with broader networks to break down the frequencies, check them against a stored memory bank, and translate an invisible vibration in the air into a conscious thought. This processor upgrade allowed early humans to plan hunts, share the locations of hidden water sources, and pass down survival knowledge across generations. The skull grew larger to ensure that the delicate algorithms of language had enough physical space and energy to operate. The physical hardware was finally in place, the resonant chamber was formed, and the processor was enlarged, but the brain and the throat still needed a specific biological wire to connect them. For decades, both the scientific community and the general public searched for a biological holy grail. They looked for a specific language gene, imagining a single isolated piece of DNA that somehow contained the universal dictionary of human thought. We must clearly address this persistent myth. Human DNA does not store vocabulary. There is no genetic code that secretly knows the word for fire or the word for water. Instead of a hidden dictionary, geneticists identified a regulatory sequence known as FOXP2. It is vital to understand that FOXP2 is not a magic switch that suddenly grants a species the ability to speak. It is a transcription factor, a specialized piece of biological code that helps control many other genes, deeply involved in shaping neural circuits, especially in regions such as the basal ganglia and parts of the cortex that support motor control and sequence learning. To understand its true function, we must look at the physical act of speaking. Spoken language requires one of the most rapid, precise, and complex sequences of muscle movements in the entire human body. In order to produce a single simple sentence, your lips, your tongue, your jaw, your vocal cords, and your lungs must synchronize down to tiny fractions of a second. If the timing is off by even a small amount, the resulting sound can collapse into unintelligible noise. FOPX2 is one crucial regulator in a larger network of genes that support the development and tuning of corticobasal ganglia circuits, pathways connecting the cortex to deeper structures involved in motor planning and learning. These circuits help coordinate the exact motor functions needed for speech and support our ability to learn and recognize complex sequences and combinations of sounds. In this sense, FOPX2 contributes to the genetic bridge between an abstract, silent thought forming in the neocortex and the physical articulation of a word vibrating in the throat. It is part of the software driver that allows the brain to operate the vocal machinery. Consider how your body physically reacts when you are deeply exhausted or when you are heavily intoxicated. When this happens, your speech naturally begins to slur. You have not suddenly forgotten the vocabulary you want to say. Your memory is largely intact, but your highly sensitive, complex motor circuitry is misfiring. This everyday occurrence shows exactly how delicate the physical connection between a conscious thought and a moving muscle truly is. Without this kind of specific genetic wiring, the large brain and the lowered larynx would remain only partially connected systems, unable to synchronize the planning of sequences with the fine control of muscles. FOPX2 and its partner genes helped tune the necessary network cables that link the biological hardware. We built a dangerous throat, a massive calorie-hungry brain, and a complex genetic motor circuit. But what environmental pressure was severe enough that it forced this expensive hardware into existence? We must return to our core biological thesis. This extensive, risky hardware was not built in a vacuum. Evolution does not hand out brain volume and complex vocal tracts simply for our amusement. It was built specifically to solve a mathematical survival problem. To see the problem, we look at how other primates maintain their societies. Primates build deep trust and form crucial alliances through the act of physical grooming. By sitting quietly and cleaning each other's fur, they lower heart rates and establish social bonds. But as early hominids moved out of the dense forests and into the dangerous open savanna, their living groups had to grow larger for physical protection against predators. This increase in population created a severe bottleneck. Physical grooming is incredibly time-consuming. You simply cannot physically groom everyone in a large group and still have enough hours in the day to find food and rest. As group sizes approached around 150 individuals, the time cost of grooming began to clash with the need to survive. The math of social maintenance no longer worked. This is the Dunbar catalyst. The biological solution was to supplement physical touch with sound. Language is, at its core, a highly efficient form of acoustic grooming. The immense cognitive load associated with Dunbar's number, the daily need to keep track of who is a reliable ally, who is a dangerous rival, and who has access to vital resources across roughly 150 meaningful relationships, forced the brain to adapt or perish. In this light, everyday gossip is not a trivial human habit. It became a crucial survival tool. The complex biological hardware evolved specifically to allow humans to rapidly exchange intricate social information across a sprawling network, without having to physically touch every single member of the group. You could groom several allies at the same time simply by speaking to them around a fire. Think about the conversations you have with your friends. A vast amount of human speech is dedicated to discussing other people, evaluating their actions, and managing social reputations. We are constantly updating our internal map of who we can trust. You are using a millions of years old survival mechanism just to navigate your modern social circle. If you are fascinated by the hidden biological machinery running just beneath the surface of our daily lives, hit subscribe to join the Center for Curiosity. By addressing the strict mathematics of primate group sizes, early humans unlocked something far greater: Because the physical hardware was built to adapt to shifting social networks and complex acoustic data, it resulted in one of the most powerful evolutionary advantages in Earth's history. We now return to our original premise. We did not inherit a single ancestral mother tongue. If you look at the rest of the animal kingdom, many species are born with their acoustic signals strongly pre-programmed into their biology. A cat does not need to be carefully taught how to meow, and many birds produce characteristic calls with minimal learning. The core pattern is safely hardwired into their nervous systems. But human children are born functionally mute in terms of complex language. They arrive into the world possessing the necessary physical hardware, but they must actively download the local software from their community. Homo sapiens are simply the first species whose biological hardware is flexible enough to successfully run a wide range of linguistic codes built by their environment. This remarkable phenomenon is often referred to by linguists and psychologists as a grammar instinct or a universal capacity for language. A human child born anywhere on Earth effortlessly masters their local language because the developing brain is a relentless acoustic pattern-seeking machine. It natively expects that spoken words will have underlying rules, hidden structures, and logical syntax long before it actually understands what those individual words mean. Notice how young toddlers learning to speak will confidently say things like "I runned" instead of "I ran," or "two mices" instead of "two mice." They have not memorized a broken dictionary, and they did not learn that mistake from copying an adult. Instead, their biological hardware is automatically applying a regular grammatical rule of past tense or pluralization that it has intuitively extracted from the surrounding environment. The operating system applied the underlying rule correctly. It just has not learned the irregular cultural exceptions yet. The human brain is not a passive sponge waiting to be filled with vocabulary. It is an active, sophisticated decoding engine. It constantly listens to the chaotic noise of adults speaking and quietly reverse engineers the structural rules of the language. This shows that our true inheritance is not a specific set of words, but rather a universal biological capacity to learn. We possess an operating system that can adapt to the complex click consonants of Southern African languages, the precise tonal shifts of Mandarin, or the rapid consonant clusters of English with remarkable efficiency. The operating system is blind to geography. It does not care where you were born. It only cares about the data it receives during your first few years of life. It takes the acoustic input, processes it through the expanded neocortex, routes it through the genetic motor circuits, and eventually commands the descended larynx and articulators to respond. We are walking universal machines capable of running any code we are handed. But looking at the exact biological requirements of this hardware forces a chilling realization. We must redefine our place in the natural world. Language is not a magical, ethereal gift of higher consciousness. It is a highly mechanical, biologically expensive adaptation. Our unique ability to speak is the result of a risky throat, a calorie-hungry brain, and a deep evolutionary need to track our friendships across the open savanna. We traded physical safety and metabolic efficiency for the vital ability to share information. But if this powerful operating system is largely a matter of physical brain volume, precise hyoid bone placement, and specific genetic motor circuitry, it forces us to ask an unsettling question. Who else possessed that very similar physical hardware? If you want to know what happened to the older, stronger species of human that may have spoken their own languages long before we did, click the video on screen to explore the final chapter, the Neanderthal paradox. See you in the Curiosity Gap.